of all, before starting, I would like to make two statements. The first one is to thank Professor Szilágyi and Professor Nagy for their invitation and all the efforts they undertake into this cooperation, which I appreciate very much. Let's start with some framework in which I have analyzed Serbian state aid rules. First of all, stated rules and in general competition rules are something that was brought into Serbian legal system by in the context of the harmonization with EU law. So we did not have our national stated rules before signing the Stabilization and Association Agreement, and the first act was adopted only in 2009. When we analyze our national stated rules, there are actually three international agreements and three organizations to which we belong, which influence and shape our stated rules. The first one is, of course, the European Union, since Serbia signed the Stabilization and Association Agreement with the European Union. As you can see on the slide, the agreement was signed in 2008, and Serbia was granted EU candidate status in 2012. A month ago, we have marked 10 years of negotiation with the European Union. And these Stabilization and Association Agreements are actually quite familiar to all of you because they're mostly copy-pasted text from Europe agreements that Central and Eastern European countries signed before joining the European Union. If you check Article 73 of the Stabilization and Association Act, which relates to competition and state aid, you will find that there are actually three sub-requirements. One is to harmonize the national law with that of the EU. The second one is to interpret these rules in line with the criteria arising from EU law. And the third one is to have an operationally independent authority or authorities that would enforce these rules. So I will comment these three requirements a little bit later. But before that, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that actually there are two other international organizations and two additional international treaties that the country signed, which also have competition and state aid related provisions. The first one is CEFTA, the Central European Free Trade Agreement. So this is another agreement that is familiar to all of you from Central and Eastern Europe before joining the European Union. So once the country joins the European Union, its CEFTA membership ends. In this CEFTA agreement, there is also a competition and state aid related provision, which is contained in Article 21. That is the one related to state aid. And this article more or less copies what we already have in the Stabilization and Association Agreement, with the only distinction that there is no requirement of a separate state aid authority to be established by a participating country. And the least known organization is the Energy Community, and this international organization is formed by the European Union. It gathers presently Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Northern Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Kosovo, as understood under the UN Security Council Resolution 1244, countries from the Black Sea region, Moldova and Ukraine. And once again, in the Energy Community Treaty, there are competition and state aid related provisions, more specifically regarding state aid. This is contained in Article 18. So this Article 18 of the Energy Community Treaty is quite similar to the Article 21 of CEFTA. So there is a requirement of harmonization, there is a requirement of interpretation, but there is no requirement of establishing a separate state aid authority. I will first comment on the harmonization requirement, which exists in all the three treaties I have mentioned. So the first State Aid Control Act was adopted only in 2008, as I mentioned, and that is the year when the Commission for State Aid Control was established. This act was in force for 10 years, which is quite long, actually, according to today's standards, especially in a country which is acceding to the European, well, hopefully acceding to the European Union. So we tend to adopt these new laws and to amend the existing ones quite frequently. So this was in force for 10 years, and in 2019, the present one, the second one, which is still in force, was adopted, and there was reform of the State Aid Commission, which I will speak about in a few minutes. So if we were to give an assessment of the state of harmonization of the national state aid rules, I would give an answer which is twofold. If we analyze a State Aid Control Act, then the level of harmonization is really high. The majority of these provisions are merely translated from the sources of EU law. So if there are differences, these differences are actually not coming from a willingness of the legislator to introduce something different than in the European Union, but sometimes because the translation was not good. But even that is not that frequent. So generally, the State Aid Control Act is very much in line with EU law. However, the differences between EU state aid rules and Serbian state aid rules can be found in the bylaws, in the secondary legislation. Because some of the bylaws existing under EU law are not adopted at all, or some of them are adopted but are not as harmonized as the State Aid Act is. There is also a certain additional step in this harmonization efforts, which was undertaken recently in 2021. The area which was qualified as the least harmonized by the European Commission in the progress reports was the regional. The area of regulating regional aid. So in 2021, the Serbian government adopted the new regional aid regulation, and it, in addition to the undertakings in difficulty and the undertakings active in sectors of coal, steel, and synthetic fibers, which were already excluded pursuant to pre-existing state aid rules, this regulation on regional aid also excludes from its application the undertakings which are active in sectors of transport, energy, finance, insurance, management, and consulting. There are some distinction between EU and Serbian law regarding the assessment principles. There are 7 of them. I will not go into more details about it, but I will just mention that under Serbian state aid rules, only transparency and incentive effect of aid on the investment are defined as general criteria for all types of state aid. Also, the distinction regarding regional aid pertains with the regional aid map, which is not yet adopted in Serbia. Until this regional aid map is adopted, Serbia is going to be considered as one region whose GDP per capita is below or equal to 45% of the EU average. And according to my information, the state aid authority and the government are currently working on the adoption of this regional aid map. Another aspect of my analysis pertains to the interpretation requirement, and I found that this is more interesting for lawyers. There is a requirement under all the three international treaties that national state aid rules need to be interpreted in line with the criteria arising from the application of EU law. When I said EU law, it I'm referring not only to the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, Article 107 and the others, but also to the interpretative instruments which are adopted or are going to be adopted by EU institutions. So this is an evolving criterion. It includes also the case law of the General Court and the Court of Justice of the European Union. However, this provision, if read properly, refers only to cases involving trade between the European Union and Serbia. So it does not refer explicitly to purely internal state aid cases. So there is a discussion which is still, for the moment, an academic discussion, whether this requirement can be applied in purely internal cases. We do not have the response from the Constitutional Court, for example, because nobody asked that question to them. But we do have a response in Poland and in Croatia when these two countries were in the same pre-accession position in which Serbia is. So the Polish and the Croatian Constitutional Court said that national state aid rules and in general national competition rules can be interpreted in line of criteria arising out of application of EU law, even in internal cases, if there is a legal gap in the national legislation. So we cannot predict what would hypothetically the Serbian Constitutional Court say, but I find this topic quite interesting, especially to those dealing with constitutional law. And the third requirement stemming from the Stabilization and Association Agreement is that a country should establish a state aid authority that should be operationally independent. So the European Union is not insisting that there is a separate state aid authority. It is left to the discretion of a candidate country to decide whether it will establish a separate authority or whether state aid control will just be one of the competences of the competition authority. In Serbia, we do have a special authority. In some other countries in the region, which are also a candidate or potential candidate, some of them had separate authorities and then merged them into one single one, like it is the case in Montenegro or in Northern Macedonia. The institutional design of the state aid authority changed drastically in 2019 when this current rules have been adopted. The first institutional design of the state aid authority was criticized by the European Commission because that was a commission which was formed by representatives of different ministries. However, that institutional design was not drastically different to what we had in Central and Eastern European countries before joining the European Union. Nevertheless, we have changed this in 2019. So now we have a state aid authority which has institutional design which is very similar to that of the competition authority, because the members of the council, which is a decision-making body, are appointed by the national parliament, so there are no links whatsoever with the executive power. And this state aid authority is responsible to the National Assembly, to which it reports once a year. What I would like to emphasize now towards the end is that basically this insisting that much on the design of the state aid authority is in a certain aspect paradoxical, because once the country joins the European Union, it will become this will become the exclusive competence of the European Commission. To give a final evaluation, assessment of the possibility to have a different state aid rules and policy in an EU candidate country, I would say that there are that this room for a specific national state aid rules is quite limited, given these precise requirements in Stabilization and Association Agreement and CEFTA and the Energy Community Treaty. So there will be some minor specificities, particularly with respect to bylaws, but they will disappear if the country advances to the full membership in the European Union. Thank you for your attention.